Good afternoon and welcome to Upper Choslin Baptist Church's Sunday at 4. It's great to have you with us. Thank you for joining us. And for those who are joining later in the day, thank you for coming back and tuning in. It is Remembrance Sunday in the UK and churches all around the country, but not just churches, community groups and many other local authority groups will have been gathering together to remember those who served in the armed forces, those who have fallen. And it is a day for remembering that war is still going on in this world and that we need to pray for peace and pray for those who are caught up in conflict all over the world. This morning in church, we, as many people did across the country, took 2 minutes at 11 o'clock to just stop and remember and be thankful for those who have served and pray for those who are still serving. And it's a strange time, really, isn't it? Because you don't want to glorify war, you don't want to glorify conflict, but you also don't want to forget that it's happened and that it is happening. And it's finding a balance, isn't it, between remembering and being thankful to those who have given their lives in service and continue to give their service, but also praying for peace and that there won't be a need for that type of service. And I never hear anybody say we shouldn't remember. Sometimes you hear the odd objection to remembering, but most of the people that I speak to and most of the commentary that I hear accepts without any doubt, without any hesitation, that we should remember. It's a huge thing in the United States of America as well, isn't it? Thanking those who serve, regardless of your political opinion, regardless of your opinion on whether wars should be happening or wars are legal or whatever, regardless of the opinion that you have about war, to just take that moment to be thankful for those who have served and to thank those families whose sons and daughters, mothers and fathers, brothers and sisters are fighting and serving as peacekeeping forces in all parts of the world. There may be some disagreement as to whether they should be there or why they're there or how they got there. But there's no doubt that the service that is given by men and women all over the world is to be remembered. It's really important that's remembered. I don't hear anybody complain that, oh, it's centuries ago. What has that got to do with us? More than 100 years ago in the First World War. Why are we still remembering the First World War? 80 years ago since 70 years ago, whatever it is, since the Second World War. Why are we remembering that? It's not relevant to us. It doesn't matter to us. It doesn't mean anything to us. It's a generation that's gone. I never hear things like that. I never hear comments like that about how remembering it is irrelevant. Now, you might disagree with it. You might disagree with war and remembering war, whatever. But I never hear any commentary of how it's not relevant to us in these days. It's history. Why, it's historical. It's belongs to another generation. I never hear that. So it always strikes me as quite interesting when I hear that remembering what Jesus has done is irrelevant. That the whole church thing, the whole Christianity thing is irrelevant. It's another time, it's another age. It's what my parents used to do. It's what my grandparents used to do. It's nothing to do with me. And I think, well, it's of course it's got something to do with you. I do. I think it's really, really strange that we would talk about Remembrance Day and war and those who have served and those who have given their lives. And we would say, yes, that is to be remembered. Yes, it's a generation or 2 generations ago, but it is to be remembered and we should remember it. And it's important that we remember it and don't let it be forgotten. And we wear our poppies and we Take those 2 minutes at 11 o'clock on that the 11th of the 11th, and whereas you might have a conversation about faith and about religion, and somebody go, no, 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 that's my parents' generation, that's my grandparents' generation. Yeah, my grandparents used to go to church, and yeah, my parents went to Sunday school, but that's not relevant for me anymore. That's nothing to do with me. And it always strikes me as strange that people would think that. Why would you think that? In fact, remembering is a huge part of a life with God. It's a huge part of God's story. If you Google remember or do not forget or whatever in the Bible, you will find loads of entries, loads and loads of entries where God says, remember this, or because they failed to remember, then this happened. And do not forget, and do not forget, and do not forget, and make sure to remember. In fact, lots of the prayers that are prayed in the Bible, the people who pray say, Lord, in the past you did this, 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 and this. And because you did all those things, I am asking you now to do those things for us in our day, because we need this, 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 and this to happen. Lots and lots of times in the Psalms, David, who is a writer of many, many Psalms, says, Lord, you did this, you went here, you went there, and this is what you did, and that's what you did. And because of that remembering, that strengthens the faith of David as the Psalm writer to move forward and go on and keep going and believe in God for the difficult times. And I wonder if that's partly why maybe if we live a life without God and we live a life without faith, we don't have anything like that to remember. We don't have anything like that to cast our minds back and say, well, what did God do in that situation back then? Let's remember that and trust him for the situation that we find ourselves in. From the beginning to the end of the Bible, there's so much about remembering. In fact, I picked out two verses, one almost at the beginning of the Bible in Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 7. It says, remember the days of old, consider the generations long past, ask your father and he will tell you, your elders, and they will explain to you. When the Most High gave us the nations, their inheritance, when he divided mankind, he set up boundaries for peoples according to the number of sons of Israel. And he goes on, the writer goes on to talk some more. But he calls them, he says, remember the days of old. It's important that we remember. And if you feel religion and Christianity is irrelevant to you, has nothing to do with you, maybe it's because you're not remembering what God did in the past and not willing to dig back and remember and say, okay, so what did he do and why did he do it? God gets accused of doing terrible things to people. I wonder, do you know what he did and why he did the things he did? I mean, that's Deuteronomy, right? Almost at the beginning, in the early pages of the Bible. The verse that is on, if you're local and you've passed by our church, you'll have seen our poster. And the verse that we have for this month on our poster is from Psalm 90. If I can find it. I had it a minute ago. Psalm 90, and it's verse 1. And it says, Lord, you have been our dwelling place throughout all generations. Throughout all generations, God has been the dwelling place. The place where you can hide, the place where you can find shelter, and the place where you can find peace and find comfort and find wisdom and know what to do in times of difficulty. Through all generations. That's the point I'm trying to make, is he is relevant for all generations, just as relevant as it is for us to remember what was done in World War I and World War II and previous wars to that and wars since then. We remember those people, and rightly so. We should also remember God. And now I'm going to turn to near the end of the Bible. In Revelation chapter 3 and verse 3, it says, "Remember therefore what you have received and heard, obey it and repent." So from the beginning and in the middle and all through and right to the end of the Bible, there is this call to remember. Remember what you have heard and obey it. It's so important that we remember the things that God has done. And if you don't know the things that God has done, look in the Bible. Find a church that does a weekly Bible study. If you think, no, don't want to go to church on Sunday, go in the middle of the week, where like in our church, we sit around on a Wednesday evening or a Wednesday afternoon. We sit around and we discuss chunks of the Bible together so that we can understand God better and we can understand what he's doing and how to understand what's happening in our lives now in the light of who he is and how he has dealt with people in the past. For some of you, today will be a difficult day as you remember, for some of you, colleagues that you have lost, for some family and friends that you have lost, and the fact that war is still going on. We think of what's happening in Ukraine. War is still happening. There is still conflict in the world. And for some, it'll be a difficult day today. And we have prayed today as a church for you, if that is the case. But there's other things that it's important to remember. It's important to remember what God has done. It's important to remember what Jesus did on the cross. And as we come up to Advent and Christmas, this is a great time for you to visit a church or read those Bible passages. It'd be great if you owned a Bible, but you don't need to. You can Google, the whole Bible's on the internet. Go and Google BibleGateway.com and read it there. Read what God has done. Read how God brought Jesus to earth as a baby. Think about those Christmas carols that you've sung for years and years and years. Remember that nativity scene that you went to see maybe last year or 10 years ago or 20 years ago. Don't let God be forgotten in your life. Don't let Jesus be forgotten. It's important to remember. Do not forget what God has done, because he has been faithful throughout all generations. And you might not believe that, but if you investigate the things of God, I think you will find that that is true. If you're watching this, we are praying for you. And we pray God's blessing on you today on Remembrance Sunday. And as Advent starts in the next couple of weeks and we prepare for Christmas, remember what God has done. Remember that God sent his son to the earth to be a sacrifice, to live for us and then to die for us and then rise again so that we could have peace with God. Don't forget it.